You're up there all the time. You have things
Yeah.
you want to add about that?
I'm the rare. I'm a lifer because I'm from Albany. I grew up in Albany. I live. I've made my life in Saratoga, which is north of Albany. Most reporters who come to the Capitol are short timers. You know, they're on a ladder. You know, they've been on the police beat, and they're on their way to the Moscow bureau when they stop in Albany on their way. To the extent that there are any Moscow bureaus. But I would like to second what Wayne just said. It's partly a matter of location. I think also there's an obstacle in terms of the subject matter. It's so much less. It doesn't have the star power of what's going on in Washington, where you're talking about going to war and these huge national issues, and you have all the major media have bureaus in Albany. They have full-time correspondents at the White House. And it doesn't have the immediacy of city government, especially in New York City, which is the biggest media market of the state, where the city's in charge of stopping crime and picking up your garbage, and it's there right in your face, and you have these really famous people running city government. State government's sort of in between. It's I really doubt any of you could, if you live in New York City, how many of you could name your state assemblyman or your state senator? In fact, a lot of people don't know that the lower house is called the assembly. And then what state government does is kind of, for a lot of people, it's kind of vague, because they don't actually run the schools, but they pay for the schools, and they don't actually. They don't administer Medicaid, but they pay for Medicaid. They do all these really big, expensive things. They handle, literally $120 billion, but they don't do a whole lot, especially in the city where everything's handled by the city government. So I think all those things combine to push it off the front page, except when somebody's caught in a prostitution scandal, and also to push it out of the consciousness of average New Yorkers, except when they have to go and vote.
I agree with both my colleagues. Obviously, Albany is a company town and remote from the big media attention that it should get. And my worry is that newspapers around the state, medium size, are closing their Albany bureaus and pulling their people out of there. That's a calculated business decision. I worry that there is not enough interest in state government so the public's lack of interest drives the lack of coverage, and that's been a problem, and I think it's gotten worse for a variety of reasons in the last 12 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, would wheeling and dealing and corruption and lethargy be any less if state government got more coverage? Look how many reporters are based in Washington, and the degree of wrongdoing and questionable lobbying that continues to occur, nonetheless, even in the midst of all of those journalists. Mark Hanley points out, we had some contact before this session, and Mark Hanley points out that real reform in Albany would require a massive shift in attitude on the part of the public. Could a different kind of reporting bring about that massive shift?
In this climate where sex sells and facts don't matter less and less to people, and they're more concerned with their niche interests and not as good citizens should be in government. I don't know. I wonder. I don't know if that's possible.
I think it's theoretically possible that if Elliot Spitzer had unzipped his pants in Albany, no one would have reported it. He went to D.C. I don't know if when I talked about bland ambition, did I mention, I think I dropped the fact that it was a profile of George Pataki. Did I say that? I thought I left that out. But, the most important story in New York right now may be that sometime in around 2001 and 2002, the Senate decided in the redistricting after the 2000 census to expand itself to 62 members. we it seems to me, if I was a betting man, I would bet that we're gonna have a deadlocked Senate at the end of this election cycle, 31 versus 31, and no one knows what's gonna happen. No one knows how you break that deadlock. No one knows what's gonna happen, and it's a consequence of this decision that I don't know if any newspaper wrote a freestanding story about at the time that it was done. A story just about why did the Senate decide to go from a 61-member body to a 62-member body? And it is now going to be maybe the most important decision that's been made in state politics at a governmental level. It could have enormous ramifications for state government, and it just happens and no one notices. And so there's these incredibly powerful stories. You know, Mike Bloomberg, if he's done one thing, he's brought home to New York City residents who read newspapers, at least, that he can't make a decision without Albany okaying it. I mean, you know, the cameras that they have for stoplights, right? I think Bill's written about this, the cameras that they have for stoplights. It's greatly limited how many stoplights can have these cameras on them. It produces enormous revenue. It's a legitimate law enforcement tool. And one assemblyman, I think, has stopped any further expansion of cameras on stoplights. And, you know, the mayor of the city of New York can't put a camera on a stoplight unless Albany says he can. And so it's such an powerful influence on our lives, how it is that the media can't break through to people and show people just how important this is in everyday life of New Yorkers. It's our own failing in many respects, but they're complex matters.
I know this is a discussion about the media. I guess I would point out that, like, the media, some papers have pulled back their bureaus, but I know my paper has just expanded its bureau. I mean, we've gone from having one to having 3 people, and sort of 3.5 in the course of the last 3 years. And so we're sort of investing in, we think there's stuff to write about up there. We think we can make it interesting to people. The Post, I'll give them credit, they when they cover Albany, they put it on the front page. They make a big deal out of it. And the Times has a very qualified, dedicated staff. There's some good investigative journalism, the Voice, and but I think what I've been waiting for is for a U.S. attorney to get interested in Albany. And it doesn't have to be a U.S. attorney. It could be an enterprising politician, a leader of some vision and some integrity. We thought we had that in Elliot Spitzer. He was going to bring passion back to Albany, and that really hit home.
I could brought passion, but
and we might have the U.S. attorney in Michael Garcia, because he's, as I just wrote about, he's knocked off just about one politician every 8 or 9 months since he's been U.S. attorney. But I think even more constructively,
I think he's about to leave.
Well, that quite possibly. He's a Republican, and if the administration changes. But another key is to find a politician who can explain the nexus between the stuff that goes on in Albany, the stuff like the red light cameras, and your everyday life for the average voter. Tom Suozzi actually did that. I don't know if people know who Tom Suozzi is. He's the executive of Nassau County. He, kind of embarrassed himself in the primary against Elliot Spitzer because he lost by such a huge margin. But before he did that, he ran the statewide campaign. He called it Fix Albany, but it was very narrowly focused on pointing out that Albany is the one that's driving property taxes, and explaining how that works, and encouraging people to vote for lower property taxes, basically.